Welcome to the Julie Rowe Show. Today, I've got Eric Smith on the line, helping me out with another great podcast, and just wanted to welcome you, Eric.
Thanks, Julie. Good to be here.
Just so thankful for the opportunity to do these podcasts. I wanted to turn the time over to Eric to introduce our topic for the day.
Sounds good, Julie. So just a quick word for your listeners before we get started. A couple weeks ago, we had a listener who got a little bothered that I was asking Julie some of the trivial things about her life, like what she ate for breakfast. And he said it was an inconvenience to listeners to hear some of those things. So to him and to others like him, I had a reason for asking those questions, which I'll explain in a minute. I also want to mention that I helped Julie manage her emails and have noticed something kind of interesting there as well. Most people who email Julie are very kind and respectful, but there are quite a few people who don't give any greeting. Like, "Hi, Julie, my name is such and such, and I've been wondering ... They just state their problem and in a sort of demanding way ask Julie to give her insights for their specific situation. And I've just found that interesting. So these two experiences have caused me to recognize two types of listeners in Julie's circles. There are those who are respectful and view her as a person with real emotions, someone who has a family and a real personality. And then there are those who view her as more of a, I guess you could say, like a circus attraction. They tend to use her for any information they can get out of her. So I have the first-hand perspective of seeing the emotional exhaustion it is for Julie to record the unpleasant topics of the future, like this episode that we're doing today. I'd like those who are listening to this podcast to understand that whenever Julie describes these future events, she relives them. So where most of us listen in a one-dimensional way, Julie shares these things through a multi-dimensional perspective. She experiences very real visuals, sounds, smells, and all the emotional heartache that comes with speaking about it. So just for example, I've heard Julie describe the sounds of screaming men, women, and children, or the smell of death in association with some of these future events. We talk regularly on the phone, but I've learned to use caution and respect if we ever discuss those topics, which is really rare, but that's the reason. So from time to time, I'm going to ask Julie questions on a lighter note, like her favorite candy bar, so that she can have a break from the heavy stuff and so our listeners can connect with her on a more personal level. It's been really fun for me to see most of her listeners really enjoy the personal side of her life. So anyway, I encourage those who are listening to be understanding of the challenge it is for Julie to share these things. And I just want to encourage respectful communication. So with that said, Julie, do you have anything to add, or are you ready to dive in today's topic?
Eric, I just wanted to thank you for that. It's been an interesting experience for me going public with my story a little over 3 years ago. And I was as prepared as one might possibly be for that, given that I remembered and was told and had frequent communication from the other side about the importance of going public and some of the effects it would have on me and my personal life and my family. Although I have to say it's been truthfully more difficult than even I had imagined with some of the treatment I've had from people. I guess I did not expect such an outpouring of love, but I also, while I was told many times that I would be hated and despised by people, I guess I like to look at the bright side of things, and I it's hard for me to fathom that there can be people out there that really, truly despise me just because I'm speaking my truth. And I do appreciate you bringing up what you have, because you and I have talked about this, Eric. It's interesting to me how many people are interested, but quite honestly, the majority of the emails I get are quite rude. Even those that I think are well intentioned, there is an entitlement or demanding attitude, like they think I need to, cater to them, cater to their situation, And that's not everyone, right? There are a lot of people that are so kind that have emailed in love and support and encouragement and gratitude. And then there are several, like you mentioned, that it's like they don't even sign their name. They don't tell me who they are. They don't address me by name.
Mm-hmm.
They just started on an email, whether it's bashing me and telling me I'm terrible, or the people that, will just flat out send an email that says, what can you tell me about such and such and such and such?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's like, I don't even know who you are. Why would I tell you anything?
Right.
And so I try to share because I'm compelled to share because I feel strongly about this message. But I want to make it really clear that I'm not sharing any of this because somebody is demanding it of me. I'm sharing it out of the goodness of my heart because I love my brothers and sisters and because I love the Lord. And he's asking me to warn and he's asking me to share, and so I am. But my personality is the type, this is a weakness I have that I'll just tell the audience point blank. When I get emails like that, it makes me want to do the opposite. So if you're going to email me and you actually really want something out of me, I encourage you to ask kindly and ask with respect. Otherwise, you can count on that email getting ignored.
That's a fair enough request, I'd say, Julie. And again, I've read several of those emails, and there's so many people who are so gracious and very kind. So for those of you who are like that, pat yourself on the back. It's great. Yeah,
I'm so thankful to those people. So many people that have had an outpouring of love. It's been very humbling to meet so many amazing people, and I've learned so much. I expect I'm going to learn a great deal more in the coming years. I'm grateful for the blessings and opportunities that we each have to learn and grow. I hope that whatever we share today or in coming podcasts or in the documentary that's going to come out sometime in the next year, I hope people will take it for what it's meant to be, which is a message of love and of hope. And just, one of your sisters that cares a great deal about you and on a very individual level. I think that's one of the reasons it bothers me when people are so impersonal with their messages, because to me, this is a very personal message.
Yeah.
This is a message of hope that's very personal for each and every one of us. And so I just think, if we can help each other out in whatever way we can, and that means showing love and kindness and respect to each other, then we'll be the better for it. So thanks for taking time to share that, Eric.
You bet. So let's get into today's topic, which is a continuation of the geographic things that you see in the United States. And we've covered the West, the South, the Midwest, and now I thought today we could jump into the Eastern coast and whatever you want to say about that.
That sounds good. We've talked about doing this for about 3 weeks or something now, right?
Yeah.
And we keep having other things come up either in my schedule or in other topics that the Spirit kind of compelled us to talk about. It is always heavy when I step into the mode of looking at what's going on or what will possibly happen in the future. Let me see if I can transition a little bit. You'll notice, I know you notice it, Eric, because we've talked a lot, but those that are listening will notice a shift in my energy and a shift in even the tone in my voice as we step into this, because like Eric said, when I get into this mode, it's as if I'm reliving it or going there again to put myself in that place. And as my mind is opened up in vision with what I've been shown before many times, but with what I am currently being shown to talk about, because I even with the other podcasts where we've talked about Alaska and Canada and the Northwest and California and other parts of the country that we've done so far, that's a minimal coverage on those areas. People, I hope, there's just no way to explain to people the mass effect that this is going to have. I was on the phone with a couple of men today talking about my documentary, and we were discussing the state of the world and the globalists and just the financial aspects and what some of of the Satanists and others are planning, those are heavy topics, guys, and that's my life. That's what I'm doing with GTRS, is discussing things like that with people all over the country about what we can do to prepare for some of these wicked acts that have been put in place and are being planned even as we speak, and they've been planned for decades. And so to try to counter some of that dark energy and those dark forces as we come in as warriors of light and try to spread as much light and truth and help wake people up, but not causing fear. And it's a balancing act every time. If people were awakened to the reality of what we're truly facing, it would shed terror, because that's how awful some of this stuff is. Mm-hmm. On the lighter side of things, if they could wake up to how glorious God is and how amazing He is and what His plan is, then it would blast out all that darkness, and we could combat the enemy, I think, instantaneously if we had everybody on the light side. Mm-hmm. So, waking up to that. So my goal is to wake people up in a fashion that they get a little bit of a pinch, and they're not put into analysis by paralysis, that they can wake up as they're ready to wake up and do what they're supposed to do, whatever their individual mission is. And I can't speak for others as to what their missions are, but I do know what mine is, or at least a large portion of mine. And mine is to act now and to act quickly and to get the word out as quickly as possible. So, anyway, having said that, let's transition a little bit. Eric, do you have a question for me to kind of set the stage for where we are, or do you think I should pick up?
Sure. So, we talked about earthquakes, and I think you kind of started touching on the Madrid earthquake, which is essentially Midwest, but it's kind of right in that zone between the Midwest and the East. So maybe that's right. a place to start.
That is a good starting point. I don't know for sure if I'm going to do it, but I have an idea about, at a later point, mapping a large portion of where that people can look up the Madrid fault line. It'll tell you exactly where that earthquake is going to come through, although it won't be limited to that, because there'll be splintering earthquakes off of that Madrid. And but it may be that we can put a map up sometime, Eric, and do a podcast just on that Madrid and the effects of that. But I don't want to send people into terror if they live in a state that's going to get flooded or get wiped out because of that Madrid. Because if people are where they're supposed to be, then it doesn't matter what happens on this continent or anywhere else in the world. They're where they're supposed to be, and whatever happens, come what may, and love it. Having said that, if someone is warned in this message and then by the Holy Spirit to do something different than what they're doing, then the more information they have, the better off they'll be. And so as I'm looking at things right now, we have the Madrid going from the Gulf of Mexico and going all the way up to the Great Lakes. If you follow that line from the Gulf of Mexico and going on up through the southern states, then through St. Louis, on up the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, and splintering rivers off of that, you have a good, and you beeline up to the Great Lakes that'll cause an inland ocean. Going over to the east from the Great Lakes, I see mass amounts of flooding with those earthquakes and aquifers and other things that cause the earth with those earthquakes to open up, water tables underneath throughout the Midwest area there. I see, for instance, in Chicago, there's not going to be much left in Chicago. And that's both because of the Madrid, as well as foreign armies coming through, sleeper cells, false flags, riots, marauders, the whole thing, tornadoes. So that's just one example. There is a lot of good that happens in Chicago. There's also a lot of wickedness. And so there's dual purpose as to why some of these earthquakes happen and some of the flooding happen. I see a lot of Missouri flooding and a cleansing happening throughout that whole Midwest region, where there's a lot of dark energy and other things that have happened in those areas, going all the way up to the Great Lakes that need to be cleansed into Iowa and elsewhere, the Tri-Cities. So Another one is the snow effect or the lake effect. Those that live out in that area understand what I mean when you're talking about fog or cold weather with the lake effect. And just imagine, like in the days of Moses, when Pharaoh's army was coming after the Israelites after they left Egypt, and Pharaoh's army chased after them. Moses parted the Red Sea, and those that were with him that had faith crossed in safety, and Pharaoh's army was drowned, or a large portion of it. So they were drowned. And I see that foreign troops will come in on both the east and west coast as well as into the Gulf. And primarily Russians are going to come in. We already have sleeper cells. I don't want people to think we don't have foreign troops here. We already do, you guys, all over the place. The CIA is responsible in large part for starting and funding ISIS. I was told until recently that I was not to discuss ISIS. I was not allowed to talk about that. The Spirit told me not to talk about that when I went and spoke because it was too dangerous for me. But I will state now, I'm getting ready to talk more about some of this when I do my documentary. We're going to come out with some more stuff that I've been shown, that I was shown in my NDE, that I've been shown many times, and that I've been currently shown. Things that I have not talked about in my books, things I have not talked about in the podcast, or that I won't talk about in the video podcast, are being saved just for the documentary because they're that serious, and we need to make sure that they can go out in a timely manner to keep me alive and some other people alive as long as possible. Now that's going to sound dramatic to people, but that is my truth. That is my truth as I know it. And I know who I'm talking to, and I also know who is keeping their eye on me. And so I have to be very careful in what I say here, but with those sleeper cells, they will come alive more so than they are now. We're seeing bits and pieces of them in different parts of the country, but they will come alive. They're waiting for their cue. And the foreign troops will come in. The Russians will come in on the East Coast. They'll hit that northeast coast. I see them hitting land and going towards New York. They'll try to go into the D.C. area. Maine and Vermont, they get hit there, but I especially see Boston and New York being huge target areas for them. And there's historical significance to that. Anywhere we have the founding fathers. So look at the states of the 13 original colonies, and you can guess that that's one of the huge parts of the plan for the puppet masters where they're looking to take hold. You look at those 13 original states and then broaden that out. So you're talking both the northeast going into the southeast, but starting with those northeast corridors. And between weather issues with snowstorms, blizzards, the earthquakes, the tornadoes, the flooding, power outages, EMPs, the whole gamut, right? That northeast area out there is going to get hit really, really hard. The southeast is going to get hit hard too. And what I see is as those troops come inland, many of them will not be able to get to the west where the UN forces have established their, for lack of better words, their capital at Denver. They will be flooded out. They'll come to an impasse because that Madrid earthquake will happen, and it will be very difficult for them to pass because they'll have to go through water to get to the other side of the United States, with the exception of a few land passes that they could probably get to. The majority of them are going to be cut off, as will people on the east part of the United States or east coast. They will be coming inland to get away from the troops. They'll be coming inland to get away from natural disasters, the tsunamis and everything that are going to be out there. I see tsunamis everywhere from New Hampshire to Rhode Island to New York, Manhattan area, Ellis Island. I see Ferris wheels. I guess there's some kind of amusement park out there that I see out in the ocean, both in Florida and then also in New York. It looks like it's in New York. And then the Statue of Liberty is destroyed, and I see her floating with massive waves crashing all around, and I see her arm messed up, basically. And sorry, I'm not really smooth here because I'm trying to pick and choose with what I'm seeing, what I need to be putting emphasis on. Like I said, the troops will come in. People will be running from those. There'll be gas shortages, food rotting on the docks. That's already happening, but it'll happen on mass scales. It'll happen because those who are in charge of that will do everything from executive orders to other things within the government, the puppet masters, to create havoc and to keep the food from being distributed, even though it could be. Again, that's to help mass depopulation. I also see and I don't know how much of I talked about, but I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the documentary and maybe some of the video podcasts. But we have everything from Epstein-Barr virus, the Lyme bacteria, and other things that will contribute to plagues on mass distribution, and that will go throughout cities all over the world, specifically in the United States, targeted to depopulate the United States and take control of the population that's left over. And so I see nursing homes and homes for the disabled being places where they will target, because those are easier victims. School buildings, and again, guys, this is throughout the world. I'm just focusing right now on the Northeast. This is throughout the world. I see it throughout the United States. The United States in particular is their biggest target right now because we're a huge country with we've become a major military force that has become a warmongering people. We have not kept our treaties. There are a lot of reasons why foreign forces go on the attack or being utilized by the puppet masters to perform these atrocities. And I think I'll stop right there and let you ask some questions, Eric.
Fair enough. I guess I'm interested in the sequence of events. You've mentioned things like plague, things like foreign invasion, and things like earthquakes. Is there anything with regard to the sequence of those events that might be worth mentioning?
Well, there is, but I see it happening on such mass scale that it's hard for me to know the exact sequence because, for instance, I see vials of plague and other biological war mechanisms and devices being let loose into the public, weapons and stuff. But they're already doing a lot of that. They're already putting it into our vaccines. They're already putting it into our soaps, our foods, our detergents. They're already putting biological weapons into just about everything. They're putting it in our water system. That's going to come as a shock to people. It's also going to make people think I'm all the more crazy, but that is the truth. If you were to be able to test some of the drinking water and other things like beverages that you buy, you would find that I'm correct, that they have already been using a lot of those weapons and putting it into the foods that we eat and into the antibacterial soaps and stuff like that, and antibacterial gels and things. And so they do it in waves, basically, right? That's a cloaking device that they're using. They're cloaking it in those products, and then they're going to just become more aggressive, and they'll actually put it, like I talked about in some of my books, they'll actually put it in restrooms at the Super Bowl, or they'll put it in restrooms at Major League Baseball fields, where they have mass groups of people that come through washing their hands and stuff, or they'll leave it on the faucet so that everybody's touching it. The other thing is we have, with the way the weather patterns have gone, and there's reasons for that too, it's not global warming, because Global warming is just a front. It's a cover. It's a distraction. But they are manipulating the weather. They are manipulating the environment. There really is something called chemtrails. Those are real. And so that combined with the fracking operations that are increasing and causing additional earthquakes that otherwise might not have occurred had they not been messing with that. There's so many different mechanisms and devices and ways that they are distributing what will eventually lead to black plague and other plagues. Ebola will resurface at a greater degree and stuff like that. And so I also know, and I've been in contact with people that have cures. We have cures for cancer. We have, for some of the cancers anyway, we have cures for a lot of these diseases, but the puppet masters do not want us to know that there are cures, and they have gone out of their way to keep that information from the public and to sell us so many lies, and to put in action government orders and things to keep people quiet. And they've all kinds of things that I think if the public knew what's been going on behind the scenes, they would understand a little bit more as to why in the world the Chinese or the Russians would even want to invade our country. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I don't know if I even answered your question on the sequence, but I see it happening simultaneously. But I also see a wave of plague. I see some stuff happening this fall with the eclipse coming in August, on August 21st, and then the planets aligning in September. That's the first time in 7,000 years, and astrologers and astronomers can tell you more about that and the significance there. And those that know the book of Revelations in John chapter 12, Revelations 12 that John wrote, not in the book of John, but John wrote the book of Revelations chapter 12, you'll see some of that coming to fulfillment in September. And that coincides with two different things. And I was just talking to someone about this today. On August 21st is the eclipse, and on August 22nd, the state, or a large portion of the states in the United States, come due on having to pay certain bills, certain dollar figures. And many of the states right now are looking at solvency issues and essentially bankruptcy. So we've got that coming, and then we have in September, now they can put that off for about another year. What I see as a possibility is then in September, with those planets aligning, we have right around that time also the end of the United States fiscal year. And so that's not coincidental that the puppet masters have been working on that in conjunction and coinciding with the planets. And there's deeper spiritual significance to all that I'm not going to go into. So I see the possibility of some changes this fall. I don't know exactly what they'll be, but there'll be enough of a red alert system, and I think we'll be able to put off a full market crash for about another year. But maybe we have longer than that. But as early as a year from now, we could see the effects of a market crash. So you have a market crash, but you don't get the effects of it for about a year. Mm-hmm. So if we do have a market crash where the news is reporting it and everything, and they really do crash the market finally this year, then we're looking about a year out before we're really going to see the effects of what that means. We'll have some immediate effects in the next few days after they crash the market, but I'm talking about starvation, right? When we're talking real effects,
right?
We'll have about a year out from when they do that. So
interesting. So going back to like plagues and things, I think I've read you say that a man goes into a park with a vial of chemicals or something, and mm-hmm. Do you see that taking place? Maybe you kind of answered this, but do you see that taking place before, say, that big rift in the new Madrid fault zone? or
I
after?
do.
Okay.
So I see that one happening. I see that one happening before the Madrid.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So,
Because they want to spread it all over the world, right? But they especially want to spread it in the United States. That's a lot of what I've seen is the United States. Excuse me. So they want to optimize the damage they can do by spreading it as quickly as possible. So they're going to go to the biggest cities where they have big airports and people coming and going in airport restrooms and stuff like that.
so by the time you said the Russians reached the East Coast, by the time they've done that, essentially plagues or some sort of diseases have already been unleashed on a pretty wide scale on the East Coast. Is that true?
Right, right. But as far as what the effects are, because I look at it in phases, right? You might have several 100,000 people get the plague, and a, a, a few thousand of them die from it that actually get reported, and a lot of people that get sick and that die and nobody reports it because that's already going on in our world.
Hmm.
We don't hear real truth. And then we might have several million people get the plague, and at some point in time, we'll have a million people or several million people in the United States die of plague, but it'll be happening over the course of, in some cases, a matter of days or weeks, but the full effect of it, like in waves, right? Because that's how disease works; it goes in waves.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the mass amount of that happening during the 13th month war, or shortly, within a year to year and a half, 2 year period, where the first wave of the plague comes and then the second wave of the plague comes. But it's not just one plague. And then the plague mutates too. They've mutated it in labs, but then it will mutate on its own as well. And they've manipulated the cellular structure of those to be able to make that happen. That's the whole goal. And they, one of the darkest things about this is I have seen that they have manufactured it within the labs. They've taken the Lyme bacteria, or the bacteria that cause Lyme, and they've taken the bacteria that caused the Epstein-Barr virus that they always tell everybody is harmless. I can tell you it's not harmless, because those are the two things that put me in the hospital that about killed me. And those are the two diseases that I'm still fighting that have caused my other NDEs. And so when that Epstein-Barr virus surfaces, the Epstein-Barr virus spirochetes. And if people were to study the cellular structure of Epstein-Barr or the monovirus, and they were to study the Lyme bacteria, both of those diseases, one of the key features of those is that they have the ability to cloak themselves so that it's very difficult to get to the nucleus of that cell, of that particular virus or that particular bacteria. And not only that, but other viruses and other bacteria can enter in and then thereby hide within that same cell structure. And so they're cloaked as well. And so that's one of the many reasons it's very, very difficult to get rid of the plague, because they're cloaked within a cloak, essentially.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, on the scientific level.
So would
Ask
you
me how I know this.
I'm just assuming that you've been shown that in vision and on the other side of the veil.
That's correct.
When these conditions are here, would it be safe to say that those who are faithful will have had a chance to find safety?
I believe those who are meant to find safety will find it. I believe we have to work to find that safety, but I believe that there are many people who will just have to find safety in their heart, meaning they're just going to have to know that the peace that they are going to have to feel wherever they are is going to have to come with their personal relationship with the Lord. There are not enough hiding places for everybody, and I don't believe that the Lord even really wants us to hide. I believe He wants us to gather in groups in strength with priesthood power and with light energy, but I don't believe that He wants us to hunker down and let the rest of the world go to crap. He wants us to fight. He wants us to be strong. He wants us to stand tall, and he wants us to, in his message and in his gospel. And that's where true safety comes from. It's not from, living in a tent in the mountains. Although living in a tent in the mountains essentially is going to be safer than living in a city, because you won't be as easily exposed to the plague, or as easily exposed to some of those biological weapons and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, fun stuff, right?
Oh,
I mean,
it's a
who
thrill.
wouldn't want to be excited to live in these days, right? I mean,
well, if there's anything exciting, and it's not the nicest thing to talk about, it is exciting sometimes to think that prophecies that have been foretold by prophets for thousands of years, since the very beginning, could actually are actually being fulfilled and will be fulfilled in our lifetime.
that is exciting. What are the chances that I would be living on the earth right now, talking to you on the phone about things that they saw millennia years ago, right? Millennia, thousands of years, and that Christ foretold and his apostles wrote about. I think it's fascinating. I think it's interesting that I was shown things almost 13 years ago. I'm being shown things now that are going to happen later. I was shown things 3 years ago that came to pass this week. But some of these prophets and apostles saw them 2,000 years ago, and they're happening now, right? And I think that's pretty incredible. I think it's amazing, the gift of prophecy, and I'm so thankful that the Lord works that way, and that his eternal purposes have one eternal round, and we don't have to put our head in the sand. We can look out, we can stand tall, and we can look and see what's going on around us, and hopefully wake up and do whatever we're supposed to do with the information that we're given.
Yeah.
So
Julie, I just have a couple more things. You were talking about the Statue of Liberty, and that's such a powerful icon to so many people, of freedom, but you've got me just thinking back to some scriptures I've read in Isaiah, where he talks about things that are high shall be made low. And I believe, and I've come to believe, that he was speaking physically and spiritually. So I've imagined things that are physically high to come physically low, but I also know that he means the pride and arrogance in people's hearts will be made low, and they'll be humble. I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
absolutely. We hear in scripture that every knee shall bow when he comes, and I see a lot of knees bowing before he comes, and a lot of knees bowing in the next couple of years, because life is hard in general, right? But when you add these tribulations to the mix, I don't see how there is anyone on this planet who will withstand what's coming and be the better for it if they do not humble themselves. There are Satanists and Illuminists on this planet that for a time will not bow to God. They will rule and reign in their powers and their darkness for a time. But I testify that they too will be swept off this earth, and or their knees will bow to the one true God.
Mm-hmm.
They can reign with blood and terror for a while, but there will come a day where they will be swept off the earth, and it will be in droves. So the very destruction that they plan for those who are innocent or unnoticing or those that are unaware, they will be met with that very destruction themselves. It makes me think of the story of Abinadi in the Book of Mormon, where he prophesied to those wicked men and said to them, basically, as you do to me, so shall be your death. And that is exactly what happened to that king. And I see that. I see these wicked men and women who are planning, who are enacting awful satanic rituals as we speak, and the human trafficking that they've been doing, and all this human trafficking they'll continue to do, and the other things that they have been doing and are planning to do. And I see them dying from the very deaths that they plan against others. They'll turn on each other. They'll end up killing each other. And they think they have the cure for the plague for themselves. But I guarantee you a large number of them will fall subject to the plague. The very plague they have conspired to spread upon mankind, they too will fall from.
Interesting. Julie, that's a
and
perfect...
if not that, they'll be shot to death, or they will be bombed out, or they will run out of food as well. So
interesting. I was just going to say, sorry, that that's a perfect segue to a last point and kind of question I wanted to bring up of another scripture that often pops up in scriptures when I read, especially from John the Revelator in Revelations, mentions a great pit that's digged. And his counterpart in the Book of Mormon, First Nephi, he speaks of a time when he sees men during the tribulations digging a great pit, which would, to capture the righteous, which eventually is filled by those who dug the pit. And I find that very interesting,
right.
just as a second and third witness from John and from Nephi of what you were just saying about how the wicked, their plans will fail them.
Right. They will, because you cannot create any kind of a future based on darkness. There is no such thing. It's a dead end. It's a dead end every time. You can go for a little while, but you end up running out of resources because you for one, they can't trust each other. Right? Why anyone works for Satan is beyond me, but I know he's crafty and he lies and he's manipulative and he's, cutthroat, and he'll do whatever he has to compel someone or force someone or coerce someone to do things his way.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also here to tell any of those that are listening, because believe it or not, there are Satanists that listen to my podcast. So I'm here to tell them it's not too late for them. Many of them have been convinced that they've made their blood oath and they are in allegiance and they have no choice but to fulfill their contract with Satan. And I'm here to tell them, point blank, that's a lie, and you can get out. It's not too late. And I don't know how many of them will, but I am going to let you know that I know without a doubt it is not too late. You can destroy those contracts.
I always love hearing that there's hope for everybody. And Nephi left in First Nephi 14, verse 14. It's a verse that I love, and he gives me a lot of hope in that when he talks about the Church of Christ and the Covenant Church of Christ. It's interesting that he mentions two there, and I want to encourage people to go read that and study on what that meaning is and who those two churches are. But that he says that they are armed with the power of righteousness in the last days. And I just think that's a great symbol and great imagery. Despite all the things Julie's mentioned and other prophets in ancient scripture have mentioned, despite all these horrible things that are on our doorstep, that those who are righteous and truly call upon Christ and call upon God in the name of his Son will be armed with great righteousness and great power. And that's my witness. I know that will happen as well in the last days. So, Julie, thanks for your time and thanks for your witness today of these things.
Eric, thank you. I appreciate your witness. I appreciate your strength and your friendship. And I'm thankful to you for helping on these podcasts. Couldn't do it without you guys.
You bet. Let's do it again soon.
All right. That's all, folks. Until next time.